In the 1980s, many New York City artists used their work to address the city's political, social, and economic landscape. In 1982, a New York Times arts column opened with these words: "We Are Not Afraid" is the title of a new work by the artist Les Levine, and it's on view in the New York subway, where a great many people are afraid. The picture, a color photograph, is of a young couple, looking out at the world, a sunset behind them. What the two are not afraid of, the nuclear finale, muggers, unemployment, is up to the viewer to decide. Levine paid for 4,800 of these posters to be hung prominently in the subway system. As the Times notes, Levine's message is ambiguous, but in New York in the 1980s, the public refusal of fear was a clear political act. New York had almost declared bankruptcy in 1975, and it was still in bad financial shape in the beginnings of the 80s. It grew rougher still later in the decade with the crack and heroin epidemics. Some people felt that the system was failing the New York's most vulnerable residents. In response, many artists began making political work, criticizing business and the government for greed and indifference to the city's suffering. They objected to the demonization of the poor. Artists also responded negatively to the call, largely issued by city officials working on behalf of real estate developers, to clean up the streets. In practice, this meant displacing the homeless and drug-addicted, not housing or treating them, and pushing longtime renters out of their neighborhoods in favor of those who could afford to pay more. In the 60s and 70s, many artists and galleries moved to Soho, inhabiting lofts in a neighborhood abandoned by industry. In the beginning of that period, Soho had become a wasteland. By the 80s, it was considered chic, in no small part because of the art world. Now, younger, less established artists largely lived in the Lower East Side. They were well aware that their presence there could help developers transform the neighborhood. In 1988, the city tried to impose a curfew on the people inhabiting Tompkins Square Park. The people organized a protest against the curfew. On the night of August 6th, the police charged a group of protesters, and a riot began that lasted until the next morning, sweeping up activists, neighborhood residents, bystanders, and journalists.
When that riot broke out, we prevented a curfew, and it was sort of a victory for the neighborhood, that it was slowing down gentrification.
Andrew Castrucci has lived in the neighborhood since 1983. He's an artist and a founder of Bullet Space, a gallery, art studio, center for political activism and residence.
So after the riots, me and Nadia Cohen and my brother Paul Castrucci wanted to do an art project that sort of reflected this continuous stance or this victory. We decided to do a series of posters, and then it turned into a book. We made 150 books. Each print, we made 300 of each. Half were for the street and half were for the book. And then we did 10,000 newspapers that were documenting the book. So there was 3 elements, and they were all important. What's symbolic about the book is the weight of it. Artists a lot of times don't make the most practical things, but the weight is very symbolic. It weighs 17 pounds, and it kind of reflects the struggles